In the previous video, I mentioned that we inevitably lack objectivity and overemphasize the past due to the absence of an outside perspective. In this, the fifth video of the series, we'll look at gaining a greater level of objectivity and optimism about our world. I contend that everything that I said in the previous videos would have been well known and implemented decades ago if we had had access to a wider and more objective perspective. Certainly communication has improved, and so alternative ideas have been spread. In the late 60s, the Beatles sang All You Need Is Love via satellite to a global audience, and we saw the first moon landing. But in all the time since then, there has been no serious questioning of ideas such as the need to find reliable happiness in the future, and the meme about individual responsibility for happiness and harm. As we are often told, our technological development has outpaced our psychological and sociological development. We were born into mysterious bodies and a mysterious world without an instruction manual. So our fundamental ideas about people and society were inherited from others who were born earlier to the same ignorant circumstances. That's a shocking fact when you think about it. It's like we were kidnapped. Many of those ideas were just desperate inventions during the rudimentary fight for survival stage of humankind's development. Therefore, we are not being fair to ourselves if we project our negative assumptions and stumbles when imagining the future. One way to gain better objectivity about our situation and optimism about our potential, free of past prejudices, is to imagine an advanced alien utopia where people are in tune with the innate happiness of being, and so they act from natural goodwill. Common sense in that planet compared to our planet would of course be very different, just as our current common sense is very different from the common sense of 1,000 years ago. I'd like to present three variations of this thought experiment. If you want to try them by yourself, then pause the video immediately after each description. For simplicity, imagine that the aliens look human, can speak your language, can inoculate you against their diseases, possess ultra-fast space travel, and can easily defend themselves. Experiment 1. One way to imagine a utopian alien society is to think about suddenly or gradually travelling from Earth to their planet. Taking off, how do you feel? What are you thinking? When exploring their planet, what do you feel and think? Then imagine returning to Earth and communicating what you have discovered. Experiment 2. Another approach is to imagine being born in an alien utopia that is based on understanding and goodwill. Then imagine visiting Earth for a holiday as an advanced alien. Cruising above nature and the cities, knowing humankind's history and current state, how do you feel about us? What do you think? And after landing, what do you communicate? Experiment 3. Lastly, a big variation is like time travel. Imagine being born on Earth maybe 20, 50 or 100 years from now, when we have created utopia here, and you visit another slightly less developed planet as our emissary. What would you want to say? What kind of responses do you imagine receiving? Now, presuming you've already done these experiments, here are just a few of the possible results. Firstly, the results might have been negative. Perhaps you imagine being eaten by aliens, or being experimented on, or seeing crowds of passive zombie smiles, or seeing a military dictatorship, which is a dystopia. If so, then doesn't that demonstrate the overwhelming influence that our experience of this one planet has on our minds? We cannot even imagine something different and better. Another possibility is that you just drew a blank. That doesn't mean utopia is impossible. It just means that utopia might not look much different physically to our current societies. It might just be improvements in things like relationships, management structures, buildings, palliative care and education. Also, there would be no bad things like cigarettes, poverty, homelessness, manipulative politicians, environmental destruction, war and crime. Of course, you might say that you can't imagine a utopia because such a thing is impossible. But 1,000 years ago, people would have thought that our current level of relatively advanced development is much more impossible. Lastly, the results might have been positive. As the ship launched to visit the alien planet, perhaps some experimenters were surprised at how open-minded they were feeling due to the expectation of utter newness. On the planet, some might have felt a vibe of peace, appreciation, goodwill, cooperation and enjoyment, and that in turn might have triggered all kinds of fascinating right brain insights. In the second thought experiment as an alien visitor, some might have felt a visceral contrast between their life experience and the life experience of the humans, leading to an unusual sense of objectivity about humankind's current situation and optimism about its potential. In the third experiment, as an emissary from Earth to a less developed planet, some might have been surprised that discussing utopia felt like the most natural and obvious thing to do. Alternatively, of course, you might have imagined a better utopia. If so, I'm sure many people would love to hear about it. For what it's worth, when I did these thought experiments, the most striking takeaway was, as a visiting alien, seeing the fragility of Earth and its inhabitants. I saw human beings as tiny, sensitive, vulnerable creatures in one of 10 trillion galaxies. From that gigantic perspective, their predicament of responsibility, guilt, and pressure was absurd. I could easily intuit a better future without the need for a new belief system. They just needed to discover the futility of a few outdated ideas. It was obvious that it's time to step from survival of the fittest to happiness for all. And that completes this 5-video series on happiness and utopia. To recap, I've suggested that 1. Happiness is innate to being and the implicit meaning of life. 2. We can gain better self-understanding by staying in touch with feeling and interrogating cause and effect within. 3. The idea of individual responsibility is society's biggest cause of conflict. 4. Creating utopia is necessary to end others' suffering and to optimize our own potential. And it's easy because we only have to be ourselves and act from that goodwill. 5. Imagining an alien or future utopia can give us greater objectivity about our current situation and optimism about humankind's potential. Future videos will feature replies to objections and questions and/or commentaries on news events. Thanks for watching.